Salute to Knicks Nation on this Friday afternoon. And salute to NBA Nation as well, because we have an NBA Report Knicks Fan TV simulcast. On today's episode, we are talking NBA trade deadline Q&A with ESPN's front office insider. Our guy Bobby Marks is here. So call in with your questions, 657-383-1509, or you can hit us up on the KFTV NBA Report Discord. CP the Franchise, Alex Rotaro's here. And when it comes to the Knicks, Al, a rambunctious group of fans, man. After last night's 122-84 win over the champs, the Denver Nuggets. Bobby, I got to ask you, man. I mean, a lot of Knicks fans, they're putting this team up into the Eastern Conference Finals. They're on a rocket right now. It's OG Anunoby mania, front page of the New York Post. With everything going on, in January, the Knicks are making front page of the New York Post. I mean, it's like the 90s again. What did you think about this performance last night and the OG impact?
Well, they basically made the defending champs wave the white flag. I mean, that's how you look at it. I mean, the points off turnovers, I don't think Denver ever led. I mean, it was basically, it's a wire-to-wire finish off a really good Denver team who had a good win in Indiana the night before, but I think you saw in that Pacer game, like it took a lot of energy to get back. You get down and then but listen, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I had this Knicks team going to the finals before the season even started.
That's right.
It's true. Yeah, and everyone looked at me like I was like,
there
was something wrong with me. I had them in Phoenix. Now Phoenix is on a nice little run also, but here's the thing, I believe in continuity. I believe in roster continuity. And I know when you move Barrett in quickly and you get Anunoby, that certainly could disrupt that. But I think since the trade in late December, I mean, OG's been terrific. I mean, we get stats over here at ESPN every morning, like game recaps, and like we got the analytics this morning based off last night, like his analytics is like off the chart. Like his defensively is off the chart as far as how he was impacted the game against Denver. And listen, you're not going to get 26 points out of him every night. That's great. Like if that comes and he's got it going a little bit, then that's fine. But you're going to see probably more 16, 18 points, but he's going to defend your best player and he's going to disrupt things. And if you can kind of get out in transition and run, it just changes the dynamics of your team. Now, the hard part here is everyone in front of you, right? Like, you're still kind of sitting in that 4-5 range, right? Them in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. It's like you want to get out of that danger zone, right? Yeah. You want to get out of that. Like you want to get to 3 where Philly is. You want to get, I don't know if you'll get to where Milwaukee is. That's some work, but I mean, I don't think if you're a Knicks fan, and we'll talk about more and how you're set up, for the future. Like this is not a one-hit wonder here. Yeah. Like I would be surprised we get into next year and all of a sudden they take 3 steps back. Like it's not set up to be like a 4 seed and then all of a sudden now we're back to a play-in team again.
Yeah. No, that they are set up very well. The OG impact has been noticeable both by the analytics and just by watching. Like I was telling Alex last night, I mean, a lot of times you don't take too much stock into plus minus, but when you watch him, you can actually see it coming through your television because the amount of times he's in the passing lanes, he's disrupting the flow of the offense, and then offensively showing the shot creation skills that I think a lot of Knicks fans want to see. To really see, once he gets that raise, is he going to bring more to his game? And last night, man, you saw a lot of promise there as well.
No, I mean, I think you hit it right in the head. I mean, I think the big, when they got him in the trade, from an offensive standpoint, high level corner, from the corner. But, when you go into next year, what can you add on to just be, besides becoming a defensive specialist, a high level defensive specialist from an offensive standpoint, I think you're starting to see a little bit. I think he played a little bit of a different role in Toronto. Certainly with, when Siakam and then Barnes and then when you had Van Vliet there, you weren't really asked, of him to do a lot offensively here. And I think, as I said, there are nights where you're going to need him, right? Yeah. Like you're going to need him from an offense because Jalen or Julius every night is not going to be like, some nights they're going to be, a little bit off here.
Yeah,
absolutely. And, there were, when he got here, a lot of Knicks fans were saying, oh, this is our big 3. This is our big 3. And no one's really seen OG's offensive bag like that to understand what he could offer. But seeing what he did last night, some of the mid range, the step backs, and just finishing through contact, it gives this fan base some encouragement moving forward. But Bobby, where he's at in his career, what would you say like the salary should be for OG moving forward for the Knicks? Because you got to think about him, Brunson, and Randall all on the books at some point in the future.
Yeah, it eventually catches up to you. I mean, Knicks have done a great job as far as balancing, their cap ledger. There's no player earning more than $30 million. I think they're one of 7 teams that are in that boat here. You have, Randall under contract for a few more years. Brunson's extension eligible this coming off season, so I'm sure he's going to look for a pretty good number here. I mean, I think a lot of it is that what you're seeing now in the NBA is that like it's okay to negotiate, right? Like we used to have this mindset where it was like a blank check, right? Like, and maybe Siakam in Indiana, they write him a blank check based on how much they had to give up, and they only have one max guy in Halliburton already, and he gets a max. But you can like it. You don't have to write a blank check for $43 million per year or $44 million. Like me personally, I think he's probably in that 34. I think he's probably in that 34,
Yeah.
$35 million range. So you're slightly below that max. I think at the end, a lot of it, the market dictates as far as who you are. If this was 2016 and 20 out of 30 teams had cap space, then yeah, everyone would be lining up throwing, max type dollars here. But when you look at who the teams are going to be this offseason, and certainly, Philadelphia is one of them. And there's not many high level playoff teams. I don't think he fits in with Oklahoma City as far as what the Thunder are doing. Orlando's got Wagner and Bencaro already, and it gets to a little bit of a process of elimination. So for me, I think he's in that 34, $35 million range. Now, if it gets to the point where hey, we got an offer from a team for the max, then you have to make a decision like, yeah, all right, what's an extra $5 or $6 million, and how does it impact going forward as far as how we keep this roster together? But the beauty of it is, and it's similar to what Oklahoma City is probably going to go through in the future. When you have so much draft capital to either use in a trade or to keep in-house, you can sustain when you have players making high level money. You can sustain like I know we're in this mindset right now where we're saying you can't have 3 max contracts because of the second apron or the first apron or how the rules are set. You can, but you better have the resources, the roster resources to build around.
Right.
Like Oklahoma City, Holmgren, Shea, Jalen Williams. Eventually, those 3 guys are probably going to be on max contracts.
Yeah.
So now you have Josh Giddey, who's going to be extension eligible here. Now, what the beauty of it is, now you've got Cason Wallace, a cheap, inexpensive contract, who can, if things get expensive, can come in and fill that role. And you've got 10 first-round picks or 11 first-round picks. And it's similar to the situation like New York is that if you have 3 guys making, 30 million plus, which likely is going to be the case, reinforcements are on the way. You still have DiVincenzo. You still have Hart. We'll see what happens with Hartenstein this offseason, who's a free agent. Robinson's still there. You're not depleted as far as Phoenix is in a situation where it's going to be a rotating door of minimum players, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the reality of it. And New York is not in that situation.
Yeah, there certainly are in a great situation. And also, I think as you look to that second apron, I think it puts more emphasis on drafting quality players, whether it's later in rounds, upperclassmen, guys that are ready to play. Tibbs wants guys that are ready, no projects. You got to be ready to go and serve a role. So I think that also will put an emphasis on Walt Perrin and Leon Rose's scouting department to really find some gems with the draft picks that they have left. And I say that because with the February trade deadline coming up, it's funny because this Knicks bench was the story when the trade happened. Now they're 11-2 since the trade, and this Knicks bench has been playing well for over the last couple of games. What do you think they do here at the deadline? There's a lot of names being thrown out there. What's your take on it?
Well, the big trade chip's going to be Fournier, right? I mean, that's going to be the guy we've kind of circled, as far as, he's on an $18+ million contract. He's got a team option for next offseason. So that's, so if you're a team out there, you won't owe anything past, the next few months here. So I think if you're in New York now, do you need another ball handler? are you comfortable with McBride? You know, certainly in big moments here, and I think Deuce has played. I think he's played really well. You know, we're seeing more of a role here. You know, what is Bruce Brown? We're going to hear Bruce Brown a lot, probably. What is Bruce Brown? You know, certainly championship DNA. He's been in big playoff games. Malcolm Brogdon in Portland is another name probably to keep an eye on. Guys like that, as far as, maybe getting another ball handler here, but it's a matter of like, you've got 8 tradable first, right? You've got your own four. You've got that Dallas first that likely probably conveys this year. You've got a Milwaukee 1 in 25 that's got some light protection, and you've got that Wizards and Pistons 1 that's got protection. And you got a ton of seconds too here. Like, are you comfortable eliminating one of those ones? Are you comfortable, giving away your number 1 like you did last year in the Josh Hart trade, right? Like, and that was turned into, I think, in the 23 or 24, somewhere around there. For a guy that has another year left, in Brogdon, or, with Brown, who's got a team option here, and you can decline him and maybe sign at a lower number, because what you want to be careful with is taking back money for next year, is because the Anunoby contract's probably going to double, right?
Right.
Hartenstein, if you want to keep him, he's probably going to be in that $13 million range, maybe leaving a little bit less here. Fournier would come off. So you have to balance that there. But I think those are the guys, when you look at as far as, that would be in play for New York. I'm sure Knicks fans, and I see social media sometimes like, free Mikal Bridges, free Mikal Bridges, right?
Devin Booker.
And it's funny. I'm going to give a little bit of a tidbit here.
Yeah.
We have to do these, and it's going to come out on Monday. We have to do these, it's one of my least favorite things at ESPN. We have to do trades we want to see, right? Thing, and I hate doing it because it's like, oh my God, trade, So I was teasing, my editors and stuff, like, hey, maybe we do Mikal Bridges to the Knicks trade, but here's the funny stuff with that.
Yeah.
You know when the last time the Knicks and Nets made a trade was?
Was it
wait.
Hold on, because who was it? Bernard King was in net at some point.
1983.
Wow.
Was the last time the two teams made a trade. The Knicks traded a second-round pick in '84 for Len Elmore. And I'm telling you, when I worked in the Nets front office, 20 years, I don't recall one time ever picking up the phone and calling Glenn Grunwald or whoever was
Scott Layden.
Any of those guys. And say, hey, would you be interested in Kenya Martin or Richard?
Never happened.
And vice versa. It's like the Cold War, and I think the Cold War will continue there. So I think you can probably cost, even with Brooklyn continue losing, you could probably cost Mikal Bridges off the list there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's I think it's as I said, I think can you get another ball handler? Listen, before I thought Robinson was going to be ruled out indefinitely here. I think the timeline as far as where he's going to be back, can you get another big just as an insurance policy? Like I liked that. Before Utah started winning, I thought Kelly Olynyk would make sense.
Kelly Olynyk. Right? Like,
that would make sense. And then who knows? Maybe it still does with Utah fighting for a playing spot, but at least a stretch big that can make shots. He played extremely well last night in a win against the Wizards. I think he had 18 or 19 points off the bench. He's on an expiring contract. Probably doesn't cost you one. It would probably cost you multiple seconds here. But I think that's kind of the mindset here, because there's no A-lister. There's no disgruntled, there's like last year we saw Kyrie and Durant all of a sudden become available. And there's nobody of that high level, besides Levine in New York doesn't make any sense.
None. But what about and you mentioned about the taking on longer term salary, especially when they have to re-sign OG Anunoby. That's why I have a lot of doubts about the Dejounte Murray pursuit.
Yeah.
I'm not so clear on how motivated they are to get him, but he has 3 years left, on average about $26 million. So I just wonder how high they are on acquiring a guy like that, because it would be a departure from what they typically do at the deadline, which is trying to get these deals on the margins.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Murray is interesting because certainly he's probably outside of Levine the other hot name here. I just if I'm New York, I'm not giving up what Atlanta sent out to get him. right? Which
Yeah.
was like 3 1s and a pick swap. Listen, if they called and said, "Hey, we'll do Fournier in a first," yeah, maybe that's something you think about,
Yeah.
right? Like I think that's something what you think about. But you're right. It's like the numbers start to add up. Like it starts because you take Fournier off and now you put, because next year's number is like 23, 24.
Yeah.
So and it as New York has done a great job of a lot of salaries that decline, these go up. His goes up. And he's got this trade bonus too that you factor in also here. So I think that is a departure because I think you still have Brunson, you still have DiVincenzo, you still have Grimes here. Like I don't know if you need another of that, a guy that's got 4 years, $120 million left. A guy that's got 2 years, 40 left, or 2 years, 40 with a non-guaranteed in the second year or a team option. I think that probably makes more sense.
Bobby, in your article that you dropped, I think a few days ago, you mentioned how the Trailblazers, I think the trade that you mentioned in there was Blazers shipping out Brogdon to the Knicks. Is that the trade that you think the Knicks should do? Is that what do you think about that?
I think if it doesn't cost you a ton, I think, Brogdon's been pretty good in Portland. You see him, you watch these games, end of games, they've had Scoot on the bench and he's kind of been in closing time. And it gives you a guy that's been in big moments before. And it gives you another guy that can make big shots at the end of games, can defend. That would be kind of like, I had that and I think Olynyk too in there too. So either one of those here, because I get nervous a little bit about with Fournier is that what happens we get past the trade deadline, he's still here, right?
Yeah.
Like if I was advising him, I'd be like, Evan, do not entertain a buyout. Your option might get picked up because they might need that contract in the offseason to move again, right? Like that's a reality here. Because what happens if I'm just throwing a name out, Donovan Mitchell becomes available again?
Yeah.
Right. So now you look at it. Okay, we declined the Fournier option. All right, who do we have left on our roster to trade? Like, we don't have Barrett anymore. Now we got Robinson. I don't know if I want to get rid of Hart. We got Randall. Like, so there's the money component here. But as I said, Fournier is going to be interesting. But I do like the Brogdon part as long as it doesn't, like, I'm not trading 2-1 for Malcolm Brogdon. I'm not doing that. But listen, if it's our own first and it's going to be in the 20s, and I know I have that Dallas first that's going to be probably in the late teens, then that's something I might consider doing.
What about Jordan Clarkson as another name that's been floated around out there? What do you think about him and his possibility with the Knicks?
I love Jordan Clarkson's contract, and he's a 6-man guy, can come up. You need guys like that in the playoffs.
Need that.
Guys that can, like Malik Monk, in like not available, but guys guys can come off the bench in the playoffs and give you 15, 16 points or win you a quarter.
Yep.
Clarkson's contract is fascinating because it declines 40% next year. So it's like $14, $15 million, and it's in a really good number. I think it's hard. Those guys are more valuable right now, how the rules are set up. Those guys in that $14 to $20 million range are more valuable right now than Zach LaVine.
Yeah.
Because that's the third and fourth player on your roster when you have two guys on big numbers. Right? Like the $20 million guy is available, but I like Clarkson. I think it's hard if Utah was, as I said, like completely out of it. I could see it, but they're kind of hanging in here. They've won a bunch of games. I know they lost a couple, but they're kind of right in that playing, tournament, race.
Yeah, I mean, we did a mock trade where I got the Knicks, Kelly Olynyk, and my guy Colin Sexton. But now that the way that they're playing, I don't see Colin Sexton.
Sexton's been good. Yeah, he's been really
awesome.
good.
I don't think he's being available. He will be available at all.
Yeah.
Salute to everyone in the chat. Once again, hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channels. This is an NBA Report, Knicks Fan TV simulcast. CP the Franchise, Alex Rotaro's here. ESPN Front Office Insider, Bobby Marks. We got over 1,000 people here on the lunchtime check-in edition, Al, on the KFTV side. So salute to everybody on the grind. Throw a hashtag grind in the chat if you're on your lunch break and you decided to, veer off a little bit. We got important things to talk about. This Knicks team is looking like a contender. We got to talk about how we get them to the promised land. And one guy who I think could help, Bobby, my guy Alec Burks. He's over there in Detroit. Weaver seems intent on keeping both him and Bogdanovich. What do you make of that situation, man? Is he just holding them out for the highest bidder, or what's going on?
Listen, like that's why I was surprised when they were, I think they were 3-39 at the time. When you're 3-39, you're not in the business of trading second round picks to get rid of salary here.
Yeah.
And and Bagley's been really good in Washington.
He's been good. He's been good. He's been good. First
So,
game against the Knicks,
like,
he was
so
impressive.
what's the end game here? Like, what's the end game in Detroit here? You've got a ton of young players, and then you've got Burks and Bogdanovic here. Like, Burks got a ton of value. I mean, he's got a ton of value. I mean, around the league here,
Yeah.
but he's on an expiring contract. Is your intent that you're going to re-sign him in the offseason for a rebuilding team because you need veterans here for 14 to 15 million dollars? But same with Bogdanovic. It's like you really, I don't think those guys are when you're whatever 5-40, nobody's untouchable. But you rarely you don't hear his name as much as it probably should be. Like similar with the Wizards, like Tyus Jones is another name, to kind of keep an eye on here. But in the past, a team that's going to go to the lottery and has a guy on expiring, you're usually flipping him for a couple seconds, for 2 or 3 seconds. Last year, Josh Richardson got traded from I think he went to New Orleans. I think he went to New Orleans, and maybe New Orleans traded him.
Yeah.
They traded 4 seconds for him.
Yeah.
So if you're Detroit, like unless you really think you're going to re-sign this guy, you got to be looking at their trade calls for him.
Yeah. True indeed, man. Now, the big splash, because I still think that they're going to try for Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
And the reason being, number one, he's a guy, but also because I feel like going into the next offseason, he will have more leverage. With the player option after that season, he has what they didn't have before when they were negotiating with Utah, and that was leverage. So now he can maybe through back channels say, hey, I want to go to New York. I intend to stay with New York. And with Miami going after Terry Rozier, a lot of people think that they may not have the assets to go get him if they're interested. Hard to know what the Nets are thinking, but I think the longer they wait or go into the next offseason, the better the chances of getting Donovan Mitchell. How do you see that looking in terms of like potential trade assets? Like how do they get there having already traded 2 young pieces already in RJ and IQ?
Yeah, it's interesting. Back in I think it was December 15th, they were 13-12, and Garland and Mobley on the same day are like out indefinitely, right? With injuries here. And I went on NBA TV and I was supposed to talk about Trae Young in Atlanta, but somehow like my mind was thinking about Donovan Mitchell. And I said, like, listen, eventually you're going to have if this team continues to play at 500, and they've played terrific, right? Like they lose in Milwaukee the other night, but they have played really well since I think they were 14-3 before that Milwaukee game, best record in the NBA since the 15th of December. Like eventually you're going to have that Donovan Mitchell conversation. Maybe it's not right now, right? Maybe it's not at the deadline here, considering how much you gave up to get him, and you want to see this through, right? Like, why am I going to trade for a guy for a year's worth of playoffs, for a first round playoff loss to the Knicks last year? But I will say this. I think we'll learn a lot more about Donovan Mitchell in like the first week of July, because and a lot certainly what happens with Cleveland in the playoffs here, because as you said, he's got a player option for 25-26. He's extension eligible this offseason. Okay. I totally agree why Donovan Mitchell did not sign an extension last offseason, right? You can get more money, you can get more years by waiting, right? Certainly a business decision here. But if he doesn't sign an extension here, I would be certainly concerned for Cleveland. Like I can't see you going into the season with him on your roster on an expiring. And that's where if you're in New York, you're thinking, okay, like we've got 8-1s. We got to be careful as far as what we're giving up. Same with Brooklyn, who's got a ton of first round, not their own, but ton of first with the Phoenix and Dallas first, and they've got a Philly first there too. So I think that's for me, from with Cleveland and Mitchell is like, where are they the first week of July? Is there an extension? Yeah. Hey, if there's an extension in place, everybody moves on. But if there's no extension in place, then is he, are they open to business with Mitchell there?
The thing that makes me interested in the Cavs development is they have 4 players that are going to be worth all that money. Is it even possible to keep all 4 of those players? That's why I think there's still a likelihood of Donovan Mitchell going to the Knicks. What do you think about that, Bobby?
Well, you're right. I mean, so you've got Mitchell, Garland, who's on a rookie max. You've got Mobley, who's extension eligible this offseason, and then you got Jared Allen, who's probably going to look for an extension. He's got a really good contract. He'll have 2 years left here. Can you afford, basically, three max guys and a fourth making high money, and you've already traded away all your draft picks, right? Like you traded away away to the point where you can't trade them again. Like you'll have your own, but not to trade here. They've done a good job with their bench. I will say that with Strus and Niang, those two guys have given them a nice boost, and they've got LeVert for another year after this year here. So they've got like those found back end guys there. But what happens when those guys come off your books? Then you're basically kind of where Phoenix is, where you're looking at minimums again, because the salaries kind of, go up there, like where Boston eventually will be. When Derek White will have 1 year left on us. You think Derek White's going to want to sign for $18 million a year?
Yeah.
When you have Brown, Tatum, Holiday's another name. Another guy like who's going to look for a big number. Porzingis is there. Like it starts to get expensive. Is it doable? It's doable, but there's not many. Like you have to have a lot of insurance policies in case your core guys go down. That's the big thing here. Like I had a team tell me like with Phoenix with Durant, Booker, and Beal, Phoenix is great for a 25-game season, right? Like, but 82 game grind is a lot because one of those guys get down. Now you're looking at those 9 minimum guys you sign. And I think Phoenix is great for a playoff series, right? You're only playing 8 guys, right?
Yeah.
But you got to get there. Like you got to get there not as a playing team. And even them, they're looking at 4-5 with the Clips.
Mm-hmm.
That's a in the first round, that's a lot. So I think anything is doable with the new rules as far as having 3 high-level players, but it's a matter of kind of like what else do you have around them?
Good points, man. Salute to everyone in the chat. Once again, hit that thumbs up button for you boys. We are live on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. So shout out to everyone watching. This is the NBA trade deadline Q&A with ESPN front office insider Bobby Marks. Shout out to Amado, a franchise channel member on Knicks Fan TV YouTube. Sends a $10 super chat, says, Bobby Marks said Knicks are going to the finals. CP, get this man a hoodie. He said,
I said that in September. I'm not saying that in January here.
Says, get this man a KFTV hoodie. Hashtag Brunson was snubbed.
Listen.
Yeah.
I wrote it. We did a 5-on-5 last night with our writers, and I pre-wrote that one of the questions was, who is the biggest snub out of the thing? And I wrote this yesterday morning, because I was at a JV basketball game last night. And I thought it was Trae Young was going to get in because he was, and then I saw Lillard. I was like, Lillard? Like, how did Lillard all of a sudden sneak in here? And listen, Dame's on a team that's 31-13, and he's made a lot of big shots. But if you watch watch Milwaukee, like, man, it's so I wrote, certainly I thought Brunson deserved to be there. He'll get selected as a reserve. He has played at extremely, you know what you're getting with him.
Yeah.
Right. Like, hey, if he's awful, if that's fine. But there's like, if he's not making shots, there's other things that are so good about him. And I think you're getting from him every night that he can when he's on the court.
For sure. William Ronan just joined the franchise channel members. William, welcome. We have a $5 super chat from Honcho, franchise channel member, says CP Alex, Knicks fans, what's up? KFTV Road Warrior. Shout out to Redman's MagFed Games. $10 super chat says, if we were to go after Mitchell and Brogdon was involved to trade and Cleveland found something in his medical, could that hurt the deal? So would Brogdon be smart? So I guess he's saying if they found like injury, similar to, I guess, the Clippers' concerns when they tried to trade for Brogdon, what would happen there?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's easier. I think there's more of a comfort level during the season making trades, because you're watching that player play. Like you watch Portland games, he's out there, he's healthy, right? I think it becomes a little bit more of a challenge in the offseason. right? When you're and certainly when you're coming off a playoff series and guys are nicked up, and then you're like, oh, we want to trade for him, and now we got a hand issue or we got a knee issue or something like that. I think it helps. As I said, the value of Malcolm Brogdon is that he's on the court and that he's playing and that he's sustained as far as from playing. Like with Mitchell, like were they referring to Mitchell Robinson?
He was saying if you were to use Brogdon's contract to send to Cleveland for Donovan Mitchell, let's say in the offseason, and a medical issue happened.
Yeah, I mean it's a matter of like where he is health wise. Where is he after where is he at when you get through the playoffs here? That's and every doctor is different as far as what, and I'm sure what creeped in last year in Boston as far as them trying to move and that deal with the Clippers got kiboshed. That will resurface here, but a guy on an expiring. And if you're getting, listen, if the picks are more important than probably, sometimes what the player is.
Yeah. I feel like that's the case when you look at what a Donovan Mitchell cost would be, is that I feel like Cleveland would just want picks back just because what they had to deal out in the Utah trade. So I don't see how Brogdon being injured would hold anything up. I mean, for the Clippers, it was different because they're looking for a backup guard, right? They needed somebody to help run that bench. Ultimately, they get James Harden, and that's the guy who's running the show now. But I just don't see that being an issue for the Knicks if they did get Brogdon and try to move him for Spida.
No, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, I think where the Clippers were was like they couldn't afford to get another guy that was injured.
Yeah.
Right. And now especially how the past had been with Kawhi and Paul. They're like they needed a guy to be on the court, like and there was uncertainty just based off last year.
We have a $5 super chat on the NBA report. Shout out to D-Rock. He says, I'm a suffering Nets fan who's pissed we ain't completely rebuilding. Are we getting Dejounte, Wendell Carter Jr., Hachimura, and D'Lo? Help. In capital letters for Bobby Marks. Help.
Oh, I know. It's like it feels like since that Milwaukee game, like the NBA gods have not smiled down on them as far as them resting shutting down some of those players for that game. That resulted in a fine. I think for Brooklyn, it's interesting. You forget you got Simmons sitting there, making $38, $40 million.
Woof.
Supposedly, I guess he could be back on maybe Monday here. You guys saw the inability to close games. I mean, that wasn't new. I mean, that's been a trend, and it's for Brooklyn. It's hard when you're not making shots. There's no interior presence, right? There's no interior presence there. Maybe if you throw Clarkson, everything is perimeter oriented here. You saw it in the Minnesota game last night where it was hard for them to get a shot off at the end of the game. Are you snake bitten from what you went through with Harden, Durant, and Irving already? As far as trading out draft picks, are you holding on to those picks for that next superstar to become available? There'll be somebody this summer. Always is. All right. Maybe it's Trae Young, for example. I'm just throwing that name out there. So for Brooklyn, but the one thing you don't want to do, and you guys know, you see this, like the Mikal Bridges press conference the other night was like disheartening, right? Like, I've listened, I've lived through it, and being in the Nets for 20 years, and I get it. Like, Continental Airlines Arena when the Knicks were good, Knicks fans would come over, and and that's just the reality of it. That's the reality of being in New Jersey and stuff like that. But when we moved to Brooklyn in 2012, it shifted. I don't want to say like all of a sudden Knicks fans became Nets fans, but it was more balanced.
Yeah.
I would say like it was more like and you have when you have a good team. You have to have a good team. Like when Durant was there and Irving was there, like listen, they had a good team.
Yeah.
But I had never seen anything like what I saw the other night, as far as 90% Knicks fans maybe there.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be careful with if you're with the Nets with Mikal Bridges here, because who's on a really good contract, but eventually that contract will run out, and you need to win. You need to put players around him that can win here, because the likelihood for him is that these new extension rules do not help Mikal Bridges or the Nets. It just doesn't help because of where his contract could go to here. So if you're the Nets, like, you know, who can help you at the deadline? Is it Murray? Is it Brogdon? You've got no point guard next year. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the reality of it. You've got Spencer Dinwiddie and Dennis Smith Jr., who are both going to be free agents, and you cannot rely on Ben Simmons.
Mm-mm.
So and you're not going to have cap space here. So who can you go out and get as far as from a guard standpoint? And I've thrown out Murray before and I've thrown out Brogdon before, but I think it's a matter of like, are you willing to give up one of those Suns picks? Because you don't control your own first over the next 4 years. That's the hard part, is that when you don't have your own first this year, there's no incentive for you to like say, all right, you know what, we're gonna get the number 2 pick in the draft, to kind of really go bottom out. And that's a hard spot to be in. I mean, they're from a draft equity standpoint, from other teams, they're in a good spot here. But Brooklyn is going to be interesting as far as, because they've got a lot of players that teams like, right? Royce O'Neal, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dinwiddie. Yeah. I mean, but teams, because he's got an expiring contract here. Claxton's on an expiring contract here. But the reality of it is that even if they get into the top 10, they're going to be in the 9-10 game, right? Like you just look at the standings right now. You're not catching where there's a big separation from the top 8 to 9 and 10. Like Atlanta, Brooklyn, Chicago. Those are the 3 teams. I'm not putting Toronto in the mix. Those are the 3 teams competing for those 2 spots here. And even if you do win, then you got to win again, right? And then you're going to get Boston.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's an interesting spot. Listen, they're in a better. I know we're on doing Knicks stuff, but I'm rambling about the Nets stuff.
Right.
But listen, they're in a better spot than they were in 2015, 16 when Sean came in, because there weren't the draft picks there. But I said it when I did their video. It is an interesting spot, because what you want to do is build up get more draft picks, maybe, because you're not going to make, your pick isn't, it's not a great draft either. So if the 5th pick in a draft or the 6th pick in a draft, it's not like you're getting, losing Victor to Houston here. But I would be aggressive if I were them, looking at, Murray, Brogdon, guys like that. Levine doesn't do anything for me. It really doesn't. But yeah, I mean, or they could say, you know what, we're going to roll with this current group and we're going to kind of reset in the off season.
It's just interesting because I feel like, and I know you mentioned where Brooklyn doesn't have any of their draft capital where they can go tank and go get a high lottery pick. But I just feel like they should move Bridges and go get as much draft capital as possible, because I just don't see how you can continue in this type of scenario even with the draft picks that you have and the players that you have. Sure, you can trade them to get like second rounders or maybe highly protected first round picks, but it just doesn't seem like it's viable to continue to build around Mikal Bridges. So it doesn't just make sense to trade him and get as much draft capital as possible and just hit a hard reset.
It's a good point. Listen, when I was in Brooklyn, we were like hanging on for dear life towards the end, right? Like 14-15 season, after Pierce went to the Clippers and we traded Garnett to the Timberwolves for Thaddeus Young. We kind of knew the end was coming, right? Like you're just hanging on, and you didn't have draft picks. And when Sean came in, Marks, like he had no ties to the Boston trade. Like that was the reality. Like he could do it his own way. Like he didn't care if, the number 1 pick went to Boston and it turned into Jason Tatum, or the number 3 pick went there and it turned to Jalen Brown. And he could build it his own way, like how he saw fit. And they did a really good job as far as getting Russell and D'Angelo Russell and Joe Harris and that group of guys, and then turns into Durant and Irving because the culture had been reset. I always find it fascinating though, because now he's almost in that same spot, but because all these deals were his, then you can't move off these players here, because wait a minute, the picks I traded to Houston are going to turn into something here. It's kind of like a little bit of a role reversal here. And I'm going to ask you this question here. If you were the Knicks, all right, I'm just hypothetical here. Hypothetical. And Mikal Bridges all of a sudden became available. What would you offer the Nets? Besides the contract, it'd have to be what would you got 8 first, and you're not going to lose any core players. Maybe Grimes, but maybe, let's just say no core players. What would you offer them? Would you offer 4 first?
I think I would. Yeah,
I do. Yeah,
I do
can
4.
see that. Yeah,
because it's different. and we're hypothetical here. I don't want Knicks fans running around. We're getting Mikal Bridges.
Clip this up. We're getting Mikal Bridges.
Because guys like that are different than when you went through the Mitchell stuff, right? The Mitchell stuff a year and a half ago was going to be like what Barrett and Quickly or Grant, like two or three guys, and then you would have cost you draft picks, and you would have been like left with Brunson and Randall and Mitchell, and you'd be like, oh wait a minute, we don't have anything else, right? Like what else do we have here to go out and get another guy here? But like so that's where teams, and I think we heard it last year when after Brooklyn did the Durant trade. There were teams willing to offer 4 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. Like that's the reality of it here. So I think if you're Brooklyn, yes, he's got after this year 2 years left on his contract, and it's a great contract here. But I do think you do have to be careful, right? Because losing takes a toll on you. Losing in the fourth quarter takes a toll on you, and it's been, the Knicks game last night against Minnesota, the Clipper game, which was a total disaster. In the fourth quarter, 43-18, I think, or something like that. The Portland game before that at Portland here. It's been a tough sled for them. So as I said, I would love to build around him here, but at the end of the day, you have to look out for kind of what's the best interest of the team.
Yeah, this is true. Let's see a couple of fan comments here. We see Joey Diaz. He says, give him 3 first-rounders, protected, and Fournier and Grimes. Okay, we see JJ from State Farm says...
You got to remember, here's the thing. If nobody had heard my soliloquy before when I said the last time it was a trade in '83. So there's when you go buy like a car somewhere and there's like a tax on it.
Yeah.
Like the tax gets
the New
doubled.
York tax. Yes.
The New York tax.
Yes.
So the New York tax gets doubled when you're dealing with a Knicks Nets hypothetical trade here.
No question. I see a lot of fans in the chat. Hey, 4 firsts. Oh, Lynx Black says 4 firsts. You're crazy as hell. Okay, so he's out. He's out on Bridges. No Bridges for him. Talia Sadiqui doesn't think that's an upgrade of DiVincenzo. The Big Ragu's really making a name for himself in this town, man. 43%.
The Big Ragu come off the bench for you.
Yeah, why not? Why not? I would welcome that. Larry Israel, $10 super chat says, is Bobby liking his preseason finals pick more or less today? The answer is more.
My both preseason, my Suns and Knicks preseason finals pick. I feel good today. Yes,
there you go.
Friday in late January, definitely good.
There you go. All right, we're going to take 2 from the Discord, and then we'll just go rapid fire around the league before we wrap. Dan from New Jersey, rapid fire. Let's go.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
CP, Alex, Bobby.
Morning.
I just had 2 questions in particular in regards to the first one, the buyout market. Bobby, I know you reported earlier this week that, teams whose salaries are above either the first or second tax apron aren't permitted to sign a free agent above the mid-level exception. And I know the Knicks aren't really on that list. So to my understanding, that rule shouldn't really affect the Knicks on a buyout market, right?
Yep, that is correct. They are one of, probably one of 20 teams that are not impacted by that. You're looking at Boston, Milwaukee, Clips, Golden State, Phoenix, Denver, those high-spending teams.
Okay, perfect. So, you were talking a lot about continuity earlier. Me personally, I don't like the idea of trading Grimes, one of the last pieces of our young core, for simply an additional bench piece. I wanted to know what your take was on the buyout market. If you believe
Did we lose him? Still there? Oh man, he left us with a cliffhanger. Damn.
Well, I would say this regarding the buyout market here. It's interesting. Kyle Lowry, certainly, right? What happens if Kyle Lowry becomes available? Gordon Hayward, you need another big wing, maybe. I mean, the injury history there. Usually there's a reason why guys are in the buyout market, right? Like it's just the reality of it here. It's kind of like an insurance policy for you. Like, I know we make a big deal about it that, oh my God, this guy was bought out and then he's signing with so-and-so here. I mean, even with when Brooklyn went through with LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin, and that's the big reason why this rule is in place. Like, because those guys, it's basically everyone went crazy then. Like, oh my God, Brooklyn's getting all, and there was guys past their prime. I think you do have to be careful because what is the expectation of that player coming in? As far as, and I know you don't have to give up anything except, you know, having you have a roster spot here. But you have to have the expectation is if for example, if it's Kyle Lowry, what's his expectation coming in? Is it a locker room guy that you can maybe throw out in playoff minutes, you know, 8 minutes, you know, playoff games? So it will be interesting who becomes available. There always are 6 or 8 guys out there, and I think New York, you know, would be in a good position. Just a matter of like kind of who that guy is.
All right, so I think Dan hung up. So in the meantime, Stilicho on the Discord.
1 2 1 2.
You are loud and clear, sir. The mayor of the Discord, Stilicho. Let's go.
All right. Salute to everybody. Salute CP. Salute Alex. Salute Bobby. Real quick, I got 2 questions for you as well. First one is, we talk a lot about the Knicks going big game hunting. Barring Minnesota exploding in spectacular fashion, I don't think it's a shock when I say that the only guy that I really see coming available is Donovan Mitchell. And when we're talking about these moves, a lot of it is predicated on, well, is it a move that gives that allows us to then make the second move for example, a Donovan Mitchell? My question is, or my first question is, if we're looking at it that way, why not go for Dejounte Murray for the reason of Brogdon and Garland kind of perform the same role. Like, they do a lot of facilitating, whereas Dejounte Murray is a pretty darn good scorer and would feel closer to the role, in my opinion, that Donovan Mitchell played, or plays currently at least, in Cleveland. And so that would make DJM a more attractive commodity to Cleveland in terms of filling the needs that they have. That's my first question.
Okay. I'll let Bobby answer it. I mean, me and
Al,
no,
that's
we
a good point, because
the
there's always a second move, right? There's always a third move here. You know, if you're acquiring a player, like, does that turn into something else?
Yeah.
Right. Like, so you can definitely look at it from that mindset. I think if you're looking at it from the Atlanta's mindset, is like, we're not trading Dejounte Murray for Evan Fournier and a first-round pick. Okay, now Fournier and Grimes in a first-round pick, Fournier, 2 first-round picks here. So it's just a matter of what would be the appetite to take him on there, because as we've said, like when I said about Fournier, like the danger is that you get to the offseason now, you got to, whether you decline his option or if he's on your books and stuff like that, because what you always want to do is keep the contract rolling, right? Like Miami just went through this with Charlotte. Lowry was an expiring contract. Rozier comes in. He's got 2 more years after this year. It's not coming off your books, right? You're constantly, like, we've seen the beauty of Chris Paul in this, right? You know, you remember, you know that Chris Paul's never become a free agent.
Yeah, that is true. This is
so
true.
He is basically living on, when he came into the league, I mean, he's been on different contracts here. He has never lost bird rights in a deal. Like, he's never been bought out. He's never been a free agent. He's basically, it's been a rolling extension. But so I get it from that point of view, where like, hey, maybe, yeah, there's a cost associated. He's got $120 million left. Maybe not sure about the fit, but maybe he's a guy that you flip in the offseason, because, you know, we have that $19 million contract where we won't have it maybe with Evan Fournier.
Still there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, second one, rapid fire. Let's go.
Second one is, when we talk about these big game guys, especially the ones that end up making more than Mitchell, because if I remember, Mitchell's only making, what, 35 right now?
Right.
But when we talk about,
and his next deal will be up in the 50s.
Yeah, so when we're talking about these guys that make upwards of 40, 50 million, we start thinking about the contract of, unfortunately, my guy Julius Randle. And so my question is, what do you see in his future in the next 2, even maybe 3 seasons, if you think you can see that far? Do you think that he is long term going to stay in a New York Knicks uniform?
Well, I would say Julius Randle is not a max player. And that's fine. Like, no, there's only a handful of them. Like,
Yeah.
that's the reality of it. He makes 20% of the cap, right? I think where his number now is where it'll be in the future. And this is the guy who's going to get older. So he's at 28, 30, and 32. He's got a player option for that last year here. So I think that's kind of where that number is going to be. Brunson's different. Brunson's 24-9 in the last year of his deal, which is a player option. That's going to be more. Like, that's just the reality of it. That's going to be probably in the high 30s, maybe, right around that $40 million range. But I think for Randall, I think it's like Randall would be your, from a salary standpoint, when you look at Brunson and Anunoby and Randall, he'd be your third guy as far as from that perspective here. So I don't see him being in that $50 million range. Like, that's just the reality of it here. And like Brian Windhorst and I always joke about it, because I think there's 3 levels of the max, right? There's the rookie guys, the Halliburton, Edwards guys. Great. Wendy calls it the fun max, right? Like, it's all about upside. And then it's the next guys where it's like, okay, like those 7 and 9 years of service guys. Whether back in the day, maybe it was back where Luka or Giannis, or Tatum, what Tatum is on right now. And then there's like the uh-ohs, right? Like the uh-oh maxes are the ones that get you in trouble. Like Kawhi, guys, like PG, like guys that have been in the league for 10 years. It's like going to a car dealership and you like, man, I like that Mercedes there. But the guy says to you, well, it's got 90,000 miles on it. It can run for 2 years, but when you get to that third year, I don't know what's going to be like.
Yeah.
So that's where you have to be careful with. And I said, like Kyrie in Dallas, like, it's okay to negotiate. Like, Kyrie is looking for $49 million a year. Great. We have 37 to offer you because we can go out and get these 3 players with the difference. So I think that's where you'll probably see, Randall, as far as, where that number comes in, down the road.
As we go rapid fire around the NBA now, the Knicks are 2 games behind Philly right now for the 3rd spot. It's Philly, Knicks, Cleveland. Philly, who needs another guy next to Embiid and Maxey, need more shot creation, need more shooting. Do you think they make an upgrade by the deadline?
There's a balancing act there, right? We've touted, they've got $55 million, $60 million in cap space. Okay, for who? Right? Like like the free agency, I don't want to say free agency is dead, but free agency as far as roster building is 3rd on the list. Certainly trades, draft, and then free agency as far as how you go about kind of, adding to it. For me, I see them as a team that is definitely will be active, but definitely looking at guys who are on shorter deals. Almost kind of what we ran through with the Knicks, as far as guys that have like, does Miles Bridges make sense for them on basically a 4-month rental? But then you have to take on everything that comes with it, right? Like the off-court stuff. Like you got to sell your fan base on that. I don't know. I don't think Bogdanovic will become available. Like, he'd be great there. Alex Caruso would be great there. I mean, you want to trade two ones for Alex Caruso? So it's hard. I always say there's only 437 players in the NBA. That's it. Like, we're not pulling from 1,500 guys here. Like, this is like, it's only, and some of them aren't traded, and some teams don't want to make deals and stuff like that. And there's so many teams competing for playoff spots here. But Philly is, they're in. Daryl Morey is the second most has made trades during the regular season behind Sam Presti. He's an active GM here. But you saw them in Indiana last night, and I know Melton wasn't playing. They basically kind of get run off the court by an Indiana team that had lost 3 or 4 games in a row. So if it's not Embiid and Maxey, like, who else has it going? And you've got 12 guys on expiring. So, but you want to preserve your flexibility for the offseason. So how do you accomplish both there? And that's where it's kind of those trimming around the edges type deals.
Now, going to the West Coast, Bobby, there's a few teams I got to ask you about. First one being the Warriors. They got CP3. He's injured right now. They're in disarray. Do you think the Warriors move off of CP3? Or if not, what other moves should they make?
Well, I mean, if I was them, I would look just to dump Andrew Wiggins' contract. I think that's for me. Like, I think in the hypothetical trades we'd like to see, I think I had one going to Detroit for like Burks and Monty Morris, something like that. Or Charlotte for Hayward and just however, just like to kind of get that money off, because what's going to happen with Golden State is, and I think Paul is still a valuable contract, even though he's hurt, because it's non-guaranteed next year and there's no obligation to you. What's going to happen with Golden State is that you bring the band back right? And Clay's a free agent. Now it's expensive again. Like they paid $680 million in luxury tax penalties the last 6 years, 7 years. And, adding Clay puts you in the second apron again, and you're basically the same roster. I mean, so that's why I think we get cold feet when Siakam became available, because you were not going to move Kuminga and Paul for him and then have to pay Siakam $240 million. So Golden State's in that interesting spot because I don't see the one guy that changes the dynamics for that team. Like I don't see when Kawhi was available in the 2018, I think when he got traded to Toronto, like Kawhi changed the dynamics of that team. Like he came in there and things changed there, but I just don't see that one guy coming in there and changing things here. But if I was them, I would be more looking to be sellers, looking to kind of get off money as far as, whether it be that Wiggins contract.
Looking at the Lakers as the next team, they're another team that they just won the in-season tournament. They're struggling, not an efficient offense. Is Pelinka's job on the line? And if so, like, what moves are you looking for him to make?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think his job is on the line. Listen, I thought they had a pretty nice summer, just trying to stay the continuity game, and then basically, like, I know we've written like, they could have gone after Kyrie, but who else would have been left with that group? And they basically, and here's like the funny thing is like they're kind of going by what the blueprint should be: 2 max guys, and then you have a bunch of players making 15, 17, 12, like there, 9, 10, that there. But what you look at from the Lakers perspective here, who has a positive net trade asset value on the roster here? And I know Russell's played extremely well here, but who on there has where you don't have to attach a draft pick? Probably Austin Reeves, right? Like that's probably the only guy. Remove LeBron and AD from the conversation there. So everything that you're trading is going to involve draft picks, as far as they've got a 2029 first. That's the only first they have available here. I find it funny. I laugh all the time because I feel like they're linked to every player in the NBA, whether it be guys you can't get or guys that maybe they could get here. But here's another team that's kind of fighting for that playing spot with LeBron with a player option for next year here. But so I think they'll be active here, but they've turned over this roster so many times. I mean, the only guys on this team from last December of 22 are LeBron, AD, Reeves, and Max Christie. Okay. So it's continually, and you went from a playing last year, Western Conference Finals, and now you're back to playing. Like eventually, like, you got to just figure out kind of like who you are, and maybe it's just not good enough here. Like Murray there would make, Murray in with the Lakers would make sense, but I don't know if you have enough draft equity to kind of to get that done.
Yeah. Last one for you, the best in the West, the OKC Thunder.
They are.
What do they do? Do they stand pat? Do they get a 5 for Chet? Do they get a marketing? What do you think?
People in OKC get offended when I talk like trade.
They
like,
do.
Trade.
They
like,
do.
No, we're good. We're good.
They do.
Like, don't
yeah.
Why are you talking trade?
Yeah. Oh, they came for us on the NBA report, man. They don't want you talking about their future like that.
Listen. I had. It was mandated. I had to put a trade in for every team. Like listen. That was part of the gig. They are in a great spot. I mean, I said it. Them in New York are out of the playoff teams are the 2 teams that are in a really good spot as far as for them. They could take 2 different approaches here. They can say, you know what? We got the youngest roster in the NBA. I want to see what we look like in a playoff series. We've never been in a playoff series with this group. Play-in doesn't count. Yeah. I want to see us in a best-of-7 playoff series here, and then let's figure out what we need to address. Or they could say, you know what? We need an insurance 5. We're 29th in rebounding, 29th in defensive rebounding, right? I think we're 29th in second chance points allowed. We need a 5. Maybe he doesn't play. Maybe, but when we get to Denver with Jokic, or if we get the Lakers or the bigs in Minnesota, like we're going to have a problem, right? Yep. Chet's basically kind of on an island by himself here. So I think for them, it's just kind of like those, like, is Daniel Gafford available? Like that's kind of the name, like guys like that. I know I've thrown out Drummond and Thunder fans go crazy. Oh, Drummond doesn't fit. I'm like, well, he's 24 rebounds in 15 minutes is, like I'm not saying playing 40 minutes, right. Like you can throw him out for 8 minutes a night and everything here. but they're a team that's, like eventually, as we said, like finances will catch up to them here. So you're not going out and getting a guy who's got $60 million left on his contract, and then you got to pay Giddey this offseason, or Holmgren and Jalen Williams the following offseason, and then Shea Supermax, and it gets all of a sudden expensive here. But I think for them, it's just kind of those marginal deals, as far as maybe you can try to, go get an insurance 5.
Yeah, I definitely think that's what they should be looking for. But very impressive to see their young core bringing it all together, and we'll see how they fare. We'll see once they get battle tested in the playoffs what they'll need going forward, man. But this team is definitely exciting to watch. I think they play the Timberwolves on Monday, so that rematch will be fun to see. And for the trade deadline this Thursday, or a couple Thursdays, February 8th. Is when this thing all comes to a head. So we'll see what happens there with the Knicks. Bobby, anything you're working on? Any articles you have coming out?
Yeah, I mean, myself and Tim Bontemps have an article coming out, I think February 6th, and we're kind of taking, how this new CBA impacts roster building around the trade deadline here. It's kind of an interesting, from a team perspective. There's no perfect roster out there, right?
Yeah.
Like, and this thing is so new, but just kind of the perspective as far as how teams see the CBA impacting teams. Because as you remember, like, once we get to the offseason, like, the rules all of a sudden now become a little bit tighter, right? As far as the, the ability you can't send cash in a deal, and trades become a lot more difficult here.
There it is. Well, we definitely appreciate all the time you gave us, all the insights. Have a great weekend. And for those of you in the chat, we hope you guys enjoyed. Hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel. We had a great show today. Make sure you guys share this on Facebook and Twitter. And also remember that these shows are available on audio podcast format. So if you missed it live, salute to the replay gang, but you can also catch us in audio podcast format as well. So great job. We will see you guys on Knicks Fan TV tomorrow for Knicks Post Game Live. Knicks versus Heat. Another big matchup, another big test. Let's keep it rolling.